It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Tuesday, December 17th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that really thinks John Tortorella has more of a handle on this team than we might think.
Okay.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade, and I'm here, as always, with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. College football playoff is here, and you don't want to miss a moment of the action. The college football playoff presented by Allstate begins with 4 first-round games, December 20th and 21st on ESPN, ABC, TNT, and Max. To keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, including Blue Sky, and of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, it is Phantoms Tuesday, and we have a lot to get into there. Some follow-up from last week's episode and some player information, real important stuff going on in Lehigh Valley right now. But yesterday in practice, John Tortorella, had a pretty, I think, comprehensive practice on like speed, tempo, one-on-one stuff. Travis Konechny talked a lot about how it felt good getting more sort of practice situations on the grind of the game. And sometimes it just feels good to keep your legs moving in that way, which is always good. But John Tortorella had some very interesting things to say following that practice based on the questions that he was asked.
Before you give those, I want to ask, did he talk about defensive player usage?
No. And that's an area to be determined. To be fair, he was not asked about that by anybody who was present after practice. So he was asked about the defense as it relates to the forwards, which is very interesting. And I think he was very spot on, and he wasn't like mincing words, and he had positive things to say about a lot of people.
I did see that, and that's good.
Yeah, so it felt really good. And I think the first thing it felt really good about was Matvei Michkov and his development process, that Tortorella is extremely pleased with how things are going in terms of the process with Michkov, the progress he has made. And obviously he said he can't speak for Michkov, but like he really feels like the way things are going with him are good and will continue to be so. He was asked specifically about scratching him, and Torts said, I didn't have any worries about him because he's a competitive player. He'll come back 100%. And if he had a problem with it, that's when there's an issue, right? If any player that Torts scratches has a problem with it, Torts is going to have an issue with it. And Michkov is no different. Communication is getting better on the bench there. And that, the way that he carries himself on the ice is just part of who he is as his game. And that Torts is fine with it. And I think like that is, as Torts goes, like a pretty solid approach.
It's pretty solid. The only thing I still feel he's lacking to tell us is, why is he still not getting enough shifts in a lot of games? I get the last game. They were desperate for a goal, so he played more minutes than he's played in a while. But like, he still only played 19 shifts. If he's so pleased with them, I feel like he's graduated to the point where he should get the second most minutes next to Konechny.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
I think so. And I think that's probably the way that Torts was talking. It feels like that's a next step.
Okay.
For him.
We'll see. We'll watch it.
There's these like, okay, you get up a level and you plateau for a little bit. You go up a level, plateau for a little bit in terms of usage, in terms of situational play. And it feels like that's what Tortorella is trying to do with Michkov, especially with the language barrier, so that they can solidify the communication about different scenarios before he kind of graduates to doing.
Yeah, except if he says, go out there or stay out there. Michkov understands that. Trust me.
That is also true. And, he was asked specifically about, Michkov getting targeted by other teams.
Right.
And Torts just laid it out there and said, Michkov plays a certain way, and sometimes he's kind of asking for it. He didn't use those words, but that's what he said. And I was like, that is actually correct, Torts. And I'm very pleased you said that.
I'm happy he said that because he's honest with the way the player is. The big but is preseason, what were we told about protecting Michkov?
Well, and that's what's so interesting because preseason we were told that, Delorier, who's hurt.
Right. He's hurt. He wasn't protecting him even when he was healthy.
Right. And so other guys.
There's other players, right? Who else? Hathaway should be protecting him. But the problem is Torts is using him in so many other ways he can't.
That is true. But I also think Torts has evolved on that thinking since the beginning of the season, where he has seen that Michkov, sometimes he does need to be protected. Sometimes he needs to be protected from himself.
Right.
But also sometimes you let him go and you're going to choose to be like this
here's
on the
my
ice.
thinking.
You got to take those hits, Matvei.
Right. Protecting him from himself doesn't mean just having other guys jumping into the fray.
Right.
That doesn't do it. That's just making
off
sure.
Ice. That's practice time.
Correct.
That's when you do that. That's not an in-game thing.
Right. But still, there should be instant retaliation. Like when he got crunched 2 games ago when I was there on the backboards, nothing happened at that. Why?
Right. Well, I think there's 2 things going on there.
And that wasn't because of him. That was just because he is who he is.
Right,
He's a dangerous player.
Correct. That wasn't because he instigated something. And that's a situation where you go to bat for him. But if he instigates, you don't necessarily have to protect him all the time. And that's kind of where Torts, I think, is learning how to balance that a little bit. I don't think he's 100% there, to your point.
Well,
in terms of sometimes
point.
He does need to be protected.
I still have a bigger point on this. So if he does stay with Frost and Tippett, neither of those guys will ever protect him. Ever.
Tippett will sometimes. He has.
Does he have any fights to his credit in this league? I don't think so. Maybe one.
I don't know.
We've never seen him. Well, that's right. He's not an intimidator.
He got Lady Bang votes last year, as we recall.
That's what my point is. So maybe there has to be a change on that line, and maybe it should be Forster, because at least we know Forster will retaliate with physicality, where Tippett, it's like, maybe.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's not going to change, at least for the time being, according to Torts, is Frost at
That's
center.
fine.
I think that Torts is like, I get it. This is the best solution right now. It's not ideal because Frost isn't where he wants Frost to be.
Not producing well enough either, but it is the best solution.
Right. It is the best solution. And it's, he's like, he said specifically, it's an organizational need. Maybe Jet Luchenko will fill that role down the road. But for now, they don't have an ideal center for Michkov, and Frost is the best they got right now.
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of organizational needs. If people think that the list is short, the list keeps growing.
Nobody thinks that. This is just
not.
About that point.
Yeah.
This is just on that point.
I hope that.
Yeah. The other thing he talked about extensively, it was Joel Farabee. And I have been worried that he was going to come down hard on Joel Farabee for not producing, because that's something he has done in the past, right? Torts really wants Farabee produced, but Farabee is playing so well outside of actually scoring that Tortorella is very happy with him. And you ask Travis Konechny, you ask John Tortorella, he's getting a ton of chances. They just don't go. And that, he's super flexible. He can be a utility player. His checking is better this year, but everything else except for the score sheet about his game has been better this year, according to Tortorella. And I think that's evolved thinking on Tortorella's part about Joel Farabee and his game relative to last year.
I'll say he's halfway there. Here's the part that he's missing. At the core of it, and this is part of what's bad about John Tortorella.
Torts is missing, or Joel Farabee
is missing. This is one part, one facet of what's bad about Torts as a coach. If I tell you, let's say you're John Tortorella, Joel Farabee is a goal scorer, and we have to cultivate his goal scoring, he's going to be like, well, he's got to do these other things. So then John drums in the other things so much, the guys get so good at the other things that they get away from what they're actually supposed to be good at. And the last
Well,
3
but
games,
that's
hold on.
okay.
The last
Okay.
3 games for Joel Farabee, 2 shots, no shots. It's hard for
What
a
are the
goal
scoring
scorer to,
chances?
yeah, but it doesn't matter.
Stats.
He's a goal scorer. It's hard for a goal scorer to score shooting. He needs to shoot like there are a couple games where he shot 4, well, only one game in the last 6 where he shot 4 times. He does need to get 4 or 5 shots on net every game. Then he'll actually score more. There should be an emphasis on
Sure.
that.
Sure. There is, but he's getting
Is
scoring
there? I don't know if
chances.
there is. He may be getting scoring chances, but he's more of a goal scorer than a guy who's going to pick up goals. Well, it's not even pick up goals. Scoring chances is one thing. Shooting on net himself is another.
Right. And I do not disagree in terms of that is needed in order to get him on the score sheet. What I'm saying is that in the past, John Tortorella would have dogged Joel Farabee for not scoring
Okay.
because that's only what he can do. Now Joel Farabee has a more evolved game. Torts is recognizing that and is living with the lack of goal scoring right now, but that's a short-term thing in
I
my
don't know
opinion.
about that. See, now that I'm trying to get this on camera, but do it one-handed. Now that Torts is seeing that the defense is up here, he doesn't care so much that the offense is down there. He cares, but
I
he
think
doesn't
he
care enough.
cares.
He doesn't care enough to take him out of the lineup. He doesn't care enough to rip him publicly. So he'll put up with that because he is playing his system and he figures he'll just score. But I don't know. Like this is Joel Farabee's having a really bad year offensively. I don't care about the chances, to be fair. I get that he's getting them, but at some point you got to bury him because in this league doesn't matter. It's all about results.
All right. We have a lot to talk about with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, and we will get to that coming up next.
Here's the thing. We earn points on groceries, travel, and practically everything else we buy. But we should also be earning points on rent, one of our biggest monthly expenses. Bilt changed the game by letting renters earn high value points on rent and around their neighborhood. There's no cost to join Bilt, and as a member, you'll earn valuable points on rent and on everything on your everyday spending. Bilt points can be transferred to your favorite hotels, airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world you can redeem your Bilt points towards. Points could also be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Bilt members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnhl. That's jointbuilt.com/lockedonnhl. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. jointbuilt.com/lockedonnhl to start earning points with your rent payments today.
The World Series, the Super Bowl, the Olympics, the world's top athletes get to play in these top level sporting events thanks to one thing, teamwork. And teamwork can also protect your financial legacy and your family's future. Select Quote's licensed insurance agents are the perfect teammates when shopping for customized, affordable life insurance. They can find you the right policy to keep your financial legacy safely in your family's end zone. You invest so much money and time to take care of yourself and to be the healthiest, best version of you. Select Quote's exclusive policies can reward that effort. If you're in good health, they work with carriers that can get you same day coverage for up to $5 million, no medical exam required. And these policies are more affordable than you think. You can get coverage for up to $1 million for as little as $20 a month. So head to selectquote.com and a licensed insurance agent will call you right away with the right policy for your life and your budget. Get the right life insurance for you for less at selectquote.com/lockedonnhl. That's selectquote.com/lockedonnhl today to get started. Select Quote, they shop, you save. All right, on tomorrow's show, we have, as we talked about on yesterday's show, it's repeat week. So we've got Flyers versus Red Wings part 2 to talk about. Plus, we will be answering your mailbag questions. So get those in. You can email us at lockdownflyers@gmail.com. Send us a message on any of our socials or comment on our YouTube channel. All right, Russ. So not a great week for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, I would say. They did end on a good note by winning in overtime against the Cleveland Monsters. They had a back-to-back which they split. Unfortunately, just couldn't get that win in the first of the two games. They lost an absolutely dreadful game to the Toronto Marlies a week ago, 6-3. That game just went completely off the rails. I think that, it's really unfortunate because now they're like seventh in the Atlantic again. They're pretty much at 500. And, the good news is that the teams in the division are very, very close together. So there's a way forward here, but that means winning more games and winning them more consistently. I would say that, the biggest story of this last week was Jacob Gaucher getting the ELC with the Flyers. And sometimes that can send a player in a really good direction. And sometimes the excitement of it all can mean that they have a rough week the first week after the
Right.
contract. I actually thought he had a pretty good week for the first week after the contract. So he had 2 goals in the loss to the
Yeah, I think he
Marlies
was
last
charged
week.
up. That's good.
Yeah, so he had 2 goals in that game. He had an assist in the loss to Cleveland on Thursday. It was a really great effort there. So could be better, but pretty solid considering, you have a little extra energy in you
Yeah.
from getting that contract. But the other big thing that happened this week is that Anthony Richard got carted off the ice in the Marlies game. He was out the rest of that game and the rest of the week, and I could not feel worse for a person
Yeah.
than I do for Anthony Richard because he just had that positive experience with the Flyers,
Yep.
gets sent back down, and like a week or two later gets hurt. And still no word on how long term this injury could be, but based on how it looked in that game, I don't know, man.
It's the ups and downs of hockey. It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. I don't know what to say. I mean, other than I hope he's back as soon as he can get back. I mean, that's really it because that's going to matter.
Yeah, there was some good news in the sense that Louis Belpedio came back into
Yeah,
the
that's good.
lineup. He had been out for several games, but returned to the lineup on Saturday after missing those 3 games, and he scored the game-winning overtime goal. So that was very good for
That is
him
good.
and for the Phantoms there. Garrett Wilson was back in the lineup. There was a couple guys that were sick and were out, including Rodrigo Abels for a couple games. Ali Lixel was out Thursday and Saturday. So, I'm not reading too much into the lines in these games, to be honest, just because there were so many absences. I think that it's hard to really evaluate those coaching decisions because he was just kind of doing what he could with the guys he had at that time.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And they're definitely hamstrung at goalie, but they still have to do better than this. They do.
Interestingly, the Phantoms lead the AHL in overtime games. Sounds familiar with the Flyers, right?
Yeah.
So they have 11 of them and are 5-4 in the overtime, and 2 of the games went to shootouts, and they split those 2 games. So kind of dead even on that front. Could be doing a lot better in the overtime, I would say, for sure. But I think the other big thing that we talked about last week was transparency with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms
Yeah.
and how they're being run as an organization, roster decisions, how they're incorporating, key prospects into the lineup, and how they're handling player development there. And, we talked about that pretty extensively and got a little ranty about it, to be
A
honest,
little bit
a little
for
bit
good
last week.
reason. Yeah.
Lo and behold, Alan McCauley, the GM of the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, was on the radio broadcast during the Thursday game, the first of the 2 games against Cleveland. It was an interview that was recorded by Bob Rotruck, the play-by-play announcer on the radio for the Phantoms, like a week earlier as part of their team scouting meetings that they had. So
Right.
the information was a little out of date, to be fair, but I gotta say, it was not very enlightening. And that was very disappointing to me.
Yeah. I think, at some point, like, there's a lot of questions. It's not just from us, it's from fans. And what's happening with the team? If you can't say what's happening with the goalie situation, fine, but there's plenty of other things you could talk about. They didn't talk about any of it.
Not really. He talked a lot about what those meetings were because they had big meetings with Danny Briere and Jonesy and basically all the pro scouts coming together just
Right.
to have their semi-regular meetings, right? So it's
Mhm.
basically like the hockey ops department meetings. And so he talked a lot about those meetings and what they do in those meetings, but that doesn't give you any information about the Phantoms in particular. And, I think what seems to us like a lack of emphasis on this team as a part of the organization and how it fits and why it's has not been successful over the last several years.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to get frustrating for fans. Yes, they made the playoffs last year. They don't look like that team this year. They're being told it's a rebuild. They're being told that, there's a lot of good young prospects. They can't all be in juniors. Some are, sure, but they can't all be. So some of them are there and they're not producing. And at some point, you have to answer for that.
Yeah, I think so. It's a pretty big issue, and I think that we're going to continue to talk about the lack of transparency there, and try and get more insight
Yeah, I'm not
into.
saying they have to give away trade secrets or anything. I'm just saying they could say, "Hey, we expected more," or "This is why
Mhm.
this is happening. We think it's going to turn around." Like anything.
Yeah, yeah, and I think the evidence is not just the record of the team as a whole, because we understand, there's injuries, there's call-ups,
Yeah,
like, things happen at the AHL level, but I think, the fact that some key prospects aren't performing is a huge issue, and that's related to coaching, and that's related to us, what seems like a lack of emphasis on the player development going on there. Maybe there's a lot more than we know about, but we sure don't know anything about
no,
it
but I mean,
from
what's
publicly.
what's really tough now is, and we can get more into this next segment, but what's tough now is if they really needed a call up, it'd be really hard
Not a
to tell
lot.
them who.
Yep. Yep.
Where before it
So,
wasn't that hard.
yeah, and that's a perfect segue into what our next segment is, which we're going to talk about the goaltending. We're going to talk about some of the players, aka Samu Tuomaala, who just isn't where he needs to be in order to be
No.
ready for a call up. And we are going to get into all of that coming up next.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5, get 150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I would take the Rams over the Jets. Just visit fanduel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's fanduel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right. So, Russ, let's dive right in with Samu Tuomaala because I think, you look at his performance as of late, and it has not been anywhere near where it needs to be. He's got 7 games without a goal, only 2 assists in that time frame, and nothing on the board in this week, which could have made a huge difference. And I watched all these games, and I think he's getting some chances. He hit the post a couple of times, but I think like you have to do more, especially when you're the guy. You're the guy who could
Yeah,
be getting that next call up, especially now with Richard hurt,
right.
right?
I mean, he's the team's leading scorer, and he ranks 29th in the league in scoring. That's an indictment of a lot of different things, him included. So when you look at it, you say, okay, last year he had 15 goals. He should have had more, but he shut down the second half of the season, wasn't that good. Now he's shut down here. So now all we are left to believe by tracking him is he's got long periods of not scoring goals.
Yeah.
And that's not good. Because I know
No.
people after he had the 2-goal game were thinking, oh, he's going to get called up soon. No, he's not. There's no
No.
consistency here. There has to be a lot better consistency.
That's the thing, is that at the AHL level for him, he's at the point where he has to be scoring consistently.
Yeah.
I think that's the only way that there's a path forward for him here. And, you see, you know, Alexei Gendron, for example, right? He is not co completely consistent either. He's got a
Nope.
goal and 2 assists in his last 5, no goals this past weekend, but he is like he's got a trickle of stats happening, and he has his little ups and downs, but he's a little younger too,
He
right?
is,
And
but I
so
wish
he
I
has
could play like the UC Sorrow soundbite of no goals, no goals, because that's what we're talking about. No goals.
well, he does have a goal and 2
I
assists in his
know,
last 5,
but
but
not
what I'm
enough.
saying is that
Yeah, yeah,
Gendron has more consistency even than Tuomaala does, and Gendron
yeah.
doesn't necessarily have to be at that higher
Correct.
level yet. That's really where I was going with
No,
that.
and that's fair because
Eh
Tuomaala is supposed to be close, and he's
yeah.
not really close.
Yeah, and so that is troublesome to me. I think Massimo Rizzo, still no points on the board in
Yeah, it's
11 games.
disappointing.
It is disappointing for him. I think, obviously there's an adjustment, and he had all that time off because of
He did.
injury, and it was going to take some time. I think, they put together this supposedly really good top line. Then it had to get torn apart because of the call up of Richard
Right.
and injuries and whatnot. So, he hasn't had consistent line mates to really adjust to this game. But I do still think he should have maybe had some assists on the board by
No, he
now.
should. I mean, it does tell you the toll that injuries can take as far as development, but he should be doing
Mhm,
better. There's no question. I do want to point out, as an aside, so if we ever
mhm.
get to talk to Alan McCauley, maybe we could ask why they never re-signed Tanner Lisinski, because it's not like he needed to be an NHL player. He could have been a really good organizational AHL player for the rest of his career. They could have given him a 3-year deal, and he would be second to Tuomaala in points. Now, I get it, he gets hurt once in a while, but he has 19 points in just 17 games. So, like, his production's better.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he didn't want to. Maybe Lazinski was
Maybe.
like, "I'm done,"
It's
and
possible, but that's a
wanted
good
to walk
question to ask.
away.
He could, Macaulay could say that. Hey, he
Yeah,
was gonna move on. Okay, next question, no
yeah.
problem.
Yeah, we went with a lot of devils you don't know this year for the
Yes.
Phantoms, with Abels, with
Yep.
Eklund,
Yep.
and with Richard. It was all people from the outside,
Right.
and there's something to be said for developing even AHL level
Yes.
players from your draft picks so you are
That's the
familiar with
biggest
them.
misnomer is if everybody getting drafted were gonna all be NHLers, the AHL would be a horrible league. But that's
Right.
not the case. The case is you're gonna get 3 a year if you're lucky out of your NHL draft. You have like 8, 9 picks, you should get 4. But I'm just saying most times you're gonna get 2 or 3 a year. Where happens to
Yeah.
those other players? A portion of them, a good portion, should be your AHL team.
Right, and I will say Zayde Wisdom could be that one of those guys,
Right.
right?
Right. Absolutely.
Because he is slowly coming into his own.
Yeah.
He's had a rough go of it. Last season was a disaster for him.
Yeah.
This season did not start out great for him, but you know what? 2 goals, 2 assists in his last 5 games. He had a goal and an assist in the loss to Cleveland on Thursday as part of that. And his offense is picking up, and his confidence in his own play is picking up, and he's gone up and down the lineup a little bit, and he's reacted well to it. And I really think there's potential for him to be a solid AHL player for the Phantoms, and that's something they need.
It
And
is something they need. I agree. I think that would be a really good thing.
all right, we gotta talk about the goaltending,
Oh, yeah.
before
Or lack of.
so Cal Petersen played all 3 games this week because it was Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, so
Okay.
he was able to do that. Tuesday, 31 saves on 37 shots. It was a horrific game and on all fronts,
Yeah.
right? But Cal Petersen was definitely part of that conversation. I don't often credit Lappy with a lot here, but put him back in Thursday just to like get back on the horse.
Right.
You got to do that with goalies
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of
No
the
question.
time. So 32 saves on 35 shots in that game, but played a lot better. And he faced 14 shots on goal in the second period of that
That's a
game and
lot.
didn't allow any.
That's good.
The dam broke in the third period in that game. And also As we know from the last couple of years, Trey Fix-Wolanski is a Phantoms killer for Cleveland. He always
He's got a
scores.
great shot. He's just not been
He
able to make
does.
it in the NHL, but he has a great shot.
Yeah, so he was part of the problem in that game too,
Yeah.
and scored in both games that the Phantoms played against Cleveland. So you kind of got to throw that into the mix too. But then on Saturday, 23 saves on 25 shots, 2 assists in that game. When does
That's
a goalie
big.
get 2
Yeah, 2
assists
is a
in
lot.
a game?
2 is a lot.
One of them was on the overtime winner. He made a great save on a breakaway coming towards him, and then corralled the puck and sent it down ice,
Yeah.
and then
Great.
Belpedio wins it, right? So I think like he had a progressive weekend or week of
Yeah, I
games
mean, maybe he's
for him,
rebounding
but he's
now, we'll
still
see.
not the solution.
No, I
I
mean,
don't
we know
think,
that. We
right?
know that, but, like, we're tired of talking about the other part, so it's like you just have to deal with what's down there.
Right. So hopefully Cal Petersen can go into this upcoming week on a much better footing for the Phantoms. And the Phantoms do have another 3-game week. We have a Wednesday game where they're hosting Providence. There's a back-to-back on Friday and Saturday where the Marlies will be in town. So that'll be a good chance to redeem themselves after that 6-3 loss. And then the Phantoms will head to our best friends at Wilkes-Barre Scranton on Saturday. So it's going to be a tough week, but I think a really good opportunity for the Phantoms. It's, can they make it happen? Can Samu Tuomaala get on the board? Will they be healthy? We'll talk about it next
Yeah,
week.
we will. Definitely for sure. Stay tuned.
All right, that will do it for today's show. We'll be back tomorrow to talk Flyers versus Red Wings part 2. We'll have our mailbag that day. So let us know your Flyers or Phantoms questions and thoughts on any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on our YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ at Sportsology on those same socials, SPORTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. You can become a fantasy hockey expert, get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.